Before the sugar rush, before the jack-o'-lanterns, there was something far more mysterious at the heart of Halloween. Over 2,000 years ago, the Celtic people celebrated a festival called Samhain, marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the long, dark winter. This was more than just a harvest celebration. Samhain was a time when the boundary between the living and the dead was said to be at its thinnest. Feasts were laid out to honor the spirits of ancestors, but they weren't the only ones who came. Darker, more malevolent forces were said to wander the earth, and they too required their offerings. Apples, for example, were one of the key foods, but they weren't just for the living. They were used in divination rituals. Some even believed that apples could reveal dark secrets or even foretell death. And then there was the barmbrack. This seemingly innocent fruitcake held more than just dried fruits inside. Hidden within were charms, each one said to carry a different fate for the person who found it. But these weren't always the fortunes you'd wish for. A ring, yes, could promise marriage. But a thimble? A thimble meant spinsterhood, a lonely future. Worse still, some believed the wrong charm could invite misfortune. Or worse, a visit from those who dwelled beyond the veil. Refusing to partake in this ritual might anger the very spirits it was meant to appease. The connection between food and the supernatural runs deep in Samhain. Apples, in particular, held a unique significance in Celtic traditions. They represented immortality and were often associated with the afterlife. In Celtic myth, the Isle of Apples, Avalon, was a mystical paradise where souls rested after death. It's no wonder apples played such a central role in Samhain, a festival that bridged the worlds of the living and the dead. As Christianity spread across Europe, the Celtic festival of Samhain began to transform. It merged with All Hallows' Eve, a night of remembrance for the saints and the dead. But even though the festival had a new name, many of the ancient traditions remained, especially the idea of using food to honor the spirits of the dead. This brings us to the soul cake, a small, round cake made with spices, dried fruits, and sometimes marked with a cross. During the Middle Ages, the tradition of giving out soul cakes to the poor and to children became widespread, especially in England. In exchange for these cakes, people would offer prayers for the souls of the dead, believing it would help them find peace in the afterlife. This practice of souling, where the poor would go door to door offering prayers for food, is one of the earliest forms of what we recognize today as trick-or-treating. But unlike today's candy haul, these cakes were more than just a treat. They carried a sacred significance. They were meant to soothe the restless dead and bring blessings to those who gave them out. At the time, people feared that if the souls of the dead weren't properly honored, they might return as spirits, or worse. In some villages, people even left out large feasts not only for the dead, but to ward off mischievous spirits, like fairies, who were believed to roam the countryside on All Hallows' Eve. Soul cakes were traditionally made with nutmeg, cinnamon, and currants, flavors that filled the chilly autumn air with warmth. If you're thinking of baking your own soul cakes or other traditional Halloween recipes, you'll want to use a good mixing bowl to bring those ingredients together perfectly, so check out the recipe and links in the description. As Halloween evolved, so did the foods we associate with it. By the 20th century, Halloween was no longer just about solemn traditions and prayers for the dead. It was about fun, community, and, of course, candy. Let's start with a classic, the toffee apple. It was originally a British invention in the early 1900s, made as a way to use up the seasonal apple harvest. Coated in sticky sugar and sometimes nuts, these treats quickly became a symbol of autumn. Their shiny red appearance made them a staple of Halloween celebrations in both Britain and the US. Traditionally, apples were used in divination rituals during Samhain, where young people would bob for apples or peel the fruit to reveal the initials of their future spouse. It may be a fun party game now, but in the past, these were serious rituals believed to predict your fate. If you want to make your own toffee apples this Halloween, check out the pre-packaged toffee apple kits I've linked below. They make it super easy to create these nostalgic treats at home. And then we have candy corn, a Halloween treat that seems to divide people like no other. Some adore its sugary sweetness, while others can't stand the sight of it. Originally made in the 1880s, candy corn was created in the US to look like kernels of corn, a symbol of the harvest season. Its original recipe was a mix of sugar, corn syrup, and water, cooked down and poured by hand into molds. Though candy corn remains a distinctly American treat, its tricolor design, yellow, orange, and white, has become a Halloween icon. Now let's talk about pumpkins. While pumpkins seem synonymous with Halloween today, they weren't always part of the tradition. Irish immigrants brought the custom of carving turnips into America, but they soon discovered that pumpkins, native to North America, were much easier to carve. And so the jack-o'-lantern was born. Halloween's connection to the supernatural doesn't stop with candy. Some of the ingredients we use in our kitchens today have long been associated with magic and witchcraft, where herbs, roots, and fruits weren't just for cooking. They were used in rituals to protect, to heal, and sometimes to curse. Take sage, for example, an herb often used in cooking today, but in the past it was believed to ward off evil spirits. Witches were thought to use it in protective spells, and even today, burning sage, or smudging, is said to cleanse a space of negative energy. Apples, too, were seen as a powerful tool in the world of magic. As we mentioned earlier, they were used in Samhain rituals for divination, but did you know that apple seeds were believed to hold the power to foretell the future? People would throw apple seeds into the fire and watch how they burned to predict everything from marriage prospects to weather patterns. These foods, now so common in our kitchens, once held supernatural significance. Some of these foods were even thought to have deadly powers. Mandrake, for example, was a root that witches were said to use in potions and spells, but it was also rumored to scream when pulled from the ground, and its deadly properties were feared. Other plants, like belladonna, were believed to be used by witches to make potions that could harm or heal, depending on their intent. As we step deeper into the shadows of ancient Halloween lore, we come to one of the most mysterious and powerful elements in Celtic tradition, the psilocybin mushroom. These so-called magic mushrooms were no ordinary fungi. They were believed to hold the key to the other world. During Samhain, the boundary between the living and the dead was already at its thinnest. These mushrooms were thought to tear it wide open. Used in secret rituals by druids and shamans, psilocybin mushrooms were consumed not for their flavor, but for their ability to induce visions. Hallucinations, communication with spirits, and journeys into the unknown. All were said to be possible under their powerful influence. But these weren't for the faint of heart. Only the bravest or most desperate would dare consume these mushrooms during Samhain. The visions they induced could lead to enlightenment or to madness. It was said that those who dared consume them might never fully return from the spirit world. The Celts believed that through the power of the mushrooms, one could cross over into the land of the dead and communicate with spirits directly. But this was no simple ritual. It came with grave risks. A wrong step could leave your soul stranded between worlds, forever haunted by the very spirits you sought to summon. In ancient times, those who sought their power knew they weren't just playing with visions. They were playing with forces far darker and more unpredictable. From ancient feasts that honored the dead to sweet treats that fill our baskets today, Halloween's food traditions have always been a mix of the sacred and the spooky. Each dish, each ingredient carries with it centuries of history, magic, and meaning. So the next time you bite into a toffee apple, carve a pumpkin, or grab a handful of candy corn, remember, you're taking part in a tradition that stretches back over 2 millennia, from the sacred fires of Samhain to the candy-filled streets of today. And who knows, maybe the foods we enjoy today still carry a little magic from the ancient past. Because while the world has changed, our connection to the mysteries of Halloween and the foods that come with it remains as strong as ever.